Speaking with Molly Kalin, a social media expert who wrote her master's thesis on how people use Facebook to express grief. So welcome, Molly, and thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So the first question I have for you is, why do you think that people find comfort in using social media to express grief when these feelings are so personal and these forums are so public?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest reasons that people feel really comfortable sharing their feelings online is that there's a community of other people there. So they feel really supported just by sharing something, even something as simple as Facebook's like button, although it's sort of, it can be strange to say that you like something that someone's posting when they're grieving. That's a really way that people are showing support. I think, too, that it sort of opens up access to a lot of people who maybe can't attend a funeral in person or a wake or something like that. So when people find a venue to express grief, rather than just sort of thinking about it themselves, I think that's why people, turn to a service like Facebook or other social media sites.
Right. And why do you think that some people find comfort in interacting with a loved one's profile after they've died?
A huge part of that to me is that the profile itself really stands up as sort of a symbolic of that person, as who they are when they were alive. Yeah. So rather than, visiting somebody's grave maybe and talking to them, which might not feel comfortable to a lot of people, interacting with someone's profile is really a way of seeing them as they were when they were alive and sort of in their own image. So it also, I think, is a place where, somebody's life is celebrated. So it's much more about sharing stories and sharing photos and, continuing to add on to this person's legacy as opposed to mourning. It is a way of mourning, but, it's much more celebratory, or it can be. And in my experience, that's how people tend to use Facebook, as this collective archiving of who this person was, and that way.
Right. So do you think that the introduction of social media has changed the way that we are there to support grieving people?
Absolutely. I think that, social media is a place, like I said before, where there's a community of people that you can reach out to and who are there to support you. Whether or not it's on somebody's actual Facebook profile or if somebody's creating a group where you can, do the same sort of sharing of stories and supporting one another. I think that it's also, and this isn't necessarily positive or negative, but it sort of extends the grieving process publicly, at least. So, people are able to see the anniversary of when that person died might pop it up into their feed, or their birthday. There's milestones where people feel like they can reach out and continue talking to this person or sharing that they're still going through, feeling bereaved. And I think, too, it sort of brings back grieving into our lives in a way that maybe in the last 50 years, death in general has been sort of sequestered to the hospital and not really talked about. There wasn't a venue to necessarily talk about it. And so, I think that, too, is sort of a shift towards making it something that we are able to continue to talk about and brings it out of that hospital room experience.
Right. And do you think that the introduction of social media has impacted society's willingness to openly discuss death and grief, as you just touched on?
Yeah, I think it has. I think that social media has made people more quick to offer words of support and just to say, "Hey, I'm here for you," or "I'm thinking about you," or "I'm so sorry for your loss." Again, I think it opens up that circle of who can share those feelings. So a platform like Facebook and a lot of other social media platforms, it sort of democratizes those relationships and it gives equal weight to a person's family and their friends, their coworkers. So all of those people can participate, in lending support. I think at the same time that it's impacted in a slightly negative way where we are very quick to judge what other people post. And I think that's a way that some people feel hesitant to share things because they don't want to say the wrong thing. And, even if people aren't publicly said, oh, you shouldn't have said something like that, there's definitely the fear of, I don't want to overstep my boundaries, or, or the feeling that somebody else has overstepped theirs, and then you feel uncomfortable. You're like, why is that person being so active on this, peripheral friends page? They shouldn't be doing that. So it definitely changes the way that we think about it. I think it sort of, it opens it up to public, to the public in positive and negative ways.
Right. Well, at Love Lives On, we really believe that it's vital to celebrate the legacies of our loved ones and to keep their memories shining brightly. Do you think that social media has a role to play in fostering remembrance of loved ones that have gone before us?
I definitely do. I think any profile that someone creates before they pass away is going to be something that they've created in their image. And it's something that their friends and family and, loved ones can go return to for years to remember this person, to keep adding to their legacy. Oftentimes it's a place where photos are shared, and people might even post new memories that they've had that they wish the person could have been there for. So it's a way to keep that person's memory alive in the present and celebrate who they were when they were alive.
Right, because Facebook has a timeline of your life.
Yes.
Yeah, so, excellent. And are there any unwritten rules of social etiquette when it comes to expressing grief and condolences online? Like you said, people are often hesitant to post because they feel like they might be saying the wrong thing. Is there any rules that you can give to guide people in that?
So I think I think that it's a little complicated still because it's such a new experience, and even a lot of the people that I spoke to in my research are relatively young. They might not have actually experienced a friend or a family member dying yet. This might be the first experience of that for them. So they're just figuring out how to go about that anyway. So I think that something that people do oftentimes, and this came out in my research, is that people sort of wait and see what people are posting on, say, a Facebook profile, and they'll sort of gauge their relationship to the deceased as opposed to, in comparison to the person that posted. So they think, okay, this person was a very close friend who was posting on my friend's Facebook wall. They wrote several paragraphs about this person. So I should post less than that because I'm not as good of a friend, or, I wasn't as close with this person. Yeah. So maybe they're not consciously thinking that through, but that's definitely the reaction that I got from people was that, and I've seen this myself, in that we sort of want to gauge what our role is in this community and make sure we're not stepping on anyone's toes. I think too, that, there are some unwritten rules about how long you should continue to interact with that profile. And if it lasts a really long time, people who weren't necessarily as close with the deceased will feel a little uncomfortable. And, at the end of the day, everyone has different comfort levels with posting on Facebook and with grief in general. So I think, realistically, everyone needs to remember that people are dealing with things in different ways. But yeah, I think that's something that's going to evolve with the more time that goes on. And right now it's very individual based, what people feel is appropriate and inappropriate.
And how should our online interactions with the grieving person, differ from how we would speak to that person in person or over the telephone?
Yeah. So my personal opinion, I think, is that when you're on the phone with someone talking to them, you sort of let them guide that conversation. So it's more about listening to them and gauging what they need. If they want to talk to you and don't want to talk at all about somebody that has died, that's your role to be like, hey, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about a trashy TV show. Let's talk about something that's going to make you feel better. Online, I feel like that's a really nice way to just say, hey, I'm thinking of you. That's something that you can do via text, too. You don't need to say, anything other than, I'm here if you want to talk. And so I think, calling someone on the phone is a great way to just be there to listen. And even if they don't pick up, you can leave them a message and say, call me back anytime. I'm here. On Facebook, like I said, or, other social platforms, it's also a place where you can sort of add to that archive of who that person was. So you maybe wouldn't send a photo to someone in the mail, but you could post a photo on Facebook and say, I was thinking of this amazing trip that we took, and just wanted to share.
Right. And during your extensive research on this subject for your thesis, did you find any correlation between age group and the use of social media to express grief? So in other words, is Generation Z, which is more tech savvy than any other generation, more likely to use social media during a time of sadness and loss? Or is the use of social media to express grief kind of increasing across all generations?
Yeah, I think it is increasing across all generations. My research focused most heavily on students, so people aged 18 to 24, and in their experiences, like I said, it was often the first time they were experiencing grief or experiencing someone they knew passing away. So for them, I think that's going to continue to be a place where they will express grief. I think it's pretty much in line with the trends of who's using social media. So as more people of other generations, older generations, are becoming more active on Facebook, for instance, my mom, my grandma, they're both on Facebook, and they're certainly active in those conversations too. So it's really a matter of who's on the platform. I think it's, in what I've seen, I think it's pretty much even across the generations. Although, one thing to think about is that, say, a student who their primary form of interacting with their friend from high school is over Facebook when they're in college. Maybe for them, that form of communication is easier because the communication act itself hasn't changed, right? So they're typing a message to their friend and it feels the same as it did when they were alive. And so I think that can be easier for somebody who's grown up using Facebook and is going to continue using Facebook as a primary way of communicating. So it might just be more comfortable for a younger generation at first, but I think the number of people is probably pretty equal.
Yeah. And you've already touched on one of the downsides that can come from using social media to express grief, but are there any other downsides to using Facebook and other platforms to express grief?
I think that there are a few. One that I think is really prevalent is that when you see a lot of people commenting on something, and this can be in positive or negative situations, you might not feel like you need to say anything because everyone is already chipping in. And so, maybe you would have called that person, but since everyone's commenting on Facebook, you're sort of just watching it happen and then you don't feel like you need to say anything. And then too much time passes and then you feel uncomfortable. Right. So I think that can happen, where, you're sort of watching the grieving happening, but not expressing condolences and not working through your own emotions. So that's something to be aware of. And then another thing is that ultimately, when someone dies, that's really reflecting back on us. The experience of grieving is more about us than it is about that person. So I think what I could see happening in the future is that we're sort of distancing ourselves from thinking about death and as something that's going to happen to us, especially when these profiles live on and we don't see, that ending. So there is definitely sort of a warning that comes with using social media, and that you still need to work through what it means when someone dies and what that means for your own mortality. So that's something that, I guess I would, warn sounds like a strong word, but I think that's just something else that we should think about and think about how to have healthy conversations about our own death.
Right, because already in our society, we have a really hard time talking about death and dying.
Exactly.
And lastly, is it conceivable that in a future society we'll completely dispense real cemeteries in favor of digital or virtual cemeteries like what exists on Facebook as memorial pages?
Yeah, I think that's so interesting because to me, I can't see that happening in my lifetime, or even into the future right now. But, ultimately, could it happen? Maybe. I think we're sort of on our way to something like that, where people are thinking through their options beyond just getting buried in the cemetery. So Obviously, the rate of cremation is much higher than it used to be. There's a lot of fragmentation going on in what I've seen in the way that people choose to be buried or cremated. And something like there's an organization called what is it? It's called the Urban Death Project, and they're really trying to meet these questions of what do we do when we run out of space? It's not conceivable to keep burying people in the cemetery. So they're trying to think through how can we create new traditions around composing or decomposing a body, or there's green options. So I think that's more of what's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of options that are all seen as valid, reasonable options for people. One thing that I do think will happen is at some point, and I think there are services that already sort of exist like this, but being able to sort of download somebody's Facebook profile and keep it on a flash drive or keep it on your computer and have this sort of digital symbol of who they were. I can see that happening, and just sort of creating these virtual memorials or pieces of who these people were, just sort of saving that. But I don't know that would replace the ceremony and the tradition of burial.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Molly, for joining me today and taking the time. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, and I know that our viewers are going to benefit so much from your expertise.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is Courtney from Love Lives On. Thank you for watching. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our YouTube channel for more ways that we can celebrate our loved ones' lives now and forever.